Third time it's crashed. Here we go. We're going to revamp this. Okay, we just came out. We spent an entire day pre-Cambrian. That's before the Cambrian. That's a 4 billion year long period. The Earth is changing lots of dramatic things, but nothing we can pin down. It's hard to do because there's not a lot of life. It's all small, very few multicellular things. Everything's going. And now we've got diversification. We've got all sorts of life happening here. We're going to begin with the Cambrian. All right, we're going to take, this is 4 billion years. We're going to take the next 540 million, only million. This is billion with a B, only million. We're going to divide it up into three eras, the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic. Okay, we're going to divide that up. We're going to take the Paleozoic era. We're going to divide it into the periods: the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Novean, Mississippian, Pennsylvanian, Permian. I'm going too fast, but this has crashed too many times today. We got to go. All right. So we've got the Paleozoic era. That's what we're talking about today. Who, what, when. This is the when, right? This is when it happens. So we're going to divide this up. Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian as the early Paleozoic, and then we're going to, starting with the Novean through the Permian, we're going to call the late Paleozoic. Most things in geology are divided early, middle, late, just like that. You can kind of narrow things down so you're not talking millions of years apart. I would love to show you this video, but this video probably is what's breaking Screencastify. This is Pangea-ish. We're going to link the video. What this does not do, if I back this up, there's pre-Pangea going on. All right, there's pre-Pangea going on. I'm not even going to risk it. There's pre-Pangea going on, and what you see is that North America and Europe combine, and you get the Appalachian Mountains, and then you've got Laurasia, and you've got Gondwana down in the South Pole, right? And they form, and they will eventually make Pangea, but you've got all these things. So in the early Paleozoic, in the Cambrian, what is there? Well, there's life. There are trilobites. The Cambrian is the trilobite time, okay? Because at the end of the Cambrian, right, you've got this, so even into the end of the Cambrian, you've got, it's trilobites, okay? So here we go. I'm checking my notes again. Here we go. So Cambrian, Ordovician, what do we get in the Cambrian? Trilobites. Here's some other animals going on. All right, let's clean this up. There's some more trilobite. That's a Ordovician. Okay, so we've got North America. We've got some Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Siberia, and then Gondwana, right? You've got trilobites. And then we're going to go to the Silurian. So in the Silurian, you've got all sorts of things are moving. You've got these are combining. You got all sorts of other things. By the time you get to Silurian, North America, there's lots of these shallow seas around. And in those shallow seas, there are lots of animals. And we're getting to the point where you can have cephalopods in the Ordovician, right? Ordovician, this North America, you've got cephalopods. The cephalopod is squid and octopus. So the ancient ancestors of the squid and octopus, those cone-looking things. Where is my picture of the cone-looking things? Sorry, this has gone collapsed so many times today. I'm losing tabs. I'm out of sorts. I'll put a bunch of links in there. Huge, long, dunce cap cone things with some tentacles hanging out of the end, darting around the ocean and the shallow seas. They're predators. They're hunting other things. That's the Ordovician. Okay? There were no vertebrates in the early Paleozoic. There were barely things that had hard shells or hard plates, so there were no spines anywhere. No vertebrates in the early Paleozoic. So in the Cambrian, the very first one, you start to get some things that start to have hard shells and hard parts, but you still don't have backbones yet. Okay. As we get to the Novean is going to switch us into the late Paleozoic. Okay, so here. So we start to get hard shells on things. Here we've got the cephalopods, we've got Silurian. By the time we get to Denovian, plants are leaving the oceans and they're moving on to land. And the diversification that happens in the Denovian is absolutely wild. Like everything comes out. right? I would show you that video again and talk to you about all the landforms that are happening, but we're going to skip that. So 40 million years later, the end of the Novean, you got the first plants hit the trees. By the time you get to the end of here, you've got forest. Actually, you got more swamp. Huge, huge trees, meter across, 30 meters tall, huge trees. The coal that we use today came from the swamp forest of the Denovian period. That's where it came from. Like these huge swaths of shallow seas, edge of the water, they were warmer. You could say it was Canada and Siberia, but Canada and Siberia were closer to the equator because the continents weren't in the same spot. So that's where the cold comes from. You've got all sorts of life. You get life, okay, at the so in the Ordovician, if we back up just a little bit, armored fish is what you have there. You start to lose the heavy armor and change that over just to scales. They're trading strength for speed and agility as they lose the armor. In the Novean, you've got primitive cartilage sharks, some of the first sharks. You got some bony fish. You got lots and lots of fish here. But you start to get, the late Denovian, you get lobed fish, primitive lungs, starting to live like amphibians, or not even amphibians. They're living in tidal flats and small ponds, and they can be true air-breathing amphibians living on land with a fish head and a tail. You've got lots of change. The amphibians come about through here in these swamps that are lots of shallow wetlands. You've got also, there's no predators on land. So while we might just think of just frogs right now, there were all sorts of weird looking amphibians because there's no predators. In fact, here you go. In the Denovian, you've got some bony fish here. You've got, where was my other picture of Denovian? Killed that tab too. Sorry. But you've got beginning of extensive land colonization by plants, right? There's no herbivores. There are barely any animals on the land. And so plants go crazy, amphibians go crazy. You have amphibians the size of what we would think of as reptiles going all over the place. All right. Pennsylvania period is when the Pennsylvanian period, that's when you get through the tropical swamps extending across North America, Europe, and Siberia. Huge trees. Okay. Permian's a problem. By the time you get Permian, these amphibians look like reptiles. The amphibians look like reptiles. They're huge. But we have a big, big die-off in the Permian. Pangea is sort of finalized in this place, but that means that you've got huge chunks of land that are now a long way away from the ocean. They start to dry out. And when all this land hits each other, you get mountain ranges. So you're adding elevation, you're drying it out. You are changing the climate of these continents dramatically, and the animals don't keep up. Huge die-off. 80% of the marine life also dies as the ocean currents change because there were all those shallow seas between the continents, and then you close that off. 75% of the amphibian families die. Not family, but kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. 75% of the families of amphibians die off in the Permian. The best real reason we've got is that there was just the change of climate from going from separate continents to a Pangea. So we have fewer species. We have less varied variants in the species. That is the greatest of over 5 mass extinctions in the last 500 million years. Okay. There are other things that it could have been. So there's lots of lava all across Siberia, ancient lava flows in the Siberian traps that it could have been contributed to it. But no. The invertebrates and the trilobites, lots of them died off. The amphibians, lots of them died off. That's the Permian is a big die-off before, which is why we switch from Paleozoic to Mesozoic. So we go from age of the fishes, amphibians, and first land animals, lots of plants, and now a whole bunch of those die off, and we're going to switch. So that's why we're switching eras, and we're going to talk